Hello, everybody. Welcome again to the Doom or Optimism podcast. Today we have Simon. Simon, you've been kind of orbiting or hanging out with some of the kind of the Doom or Optimism accounts and exchanging a lot of information about a lot of things having to do with permaculture and kind of taking community initiatives around kind of food production. And I know that you also have been involved with this organization, Permapeople.
Yeah,
Uh, so I guess that's kind of I guess for the audience first, it's a little bit of background, and but perhaps you can fill in more, just kind of, where you come from, uh, formative influences that led you to where you are today, and just a broad overview of what you're up to, and then we can dig in deeper.
all right, sure. Um, so where to start? I've been living all over Canada. I've moved to many places looking for, mostly with my partner and I, looking for that sort of community. That was always something we were after. So in doing so, we ended up moving to a lot of different places and trying a lot of different lifestyles. Um, we lived in a van for a while. We traveled around that way. We lived in a couple cities. We lived in like tiny little communities. We went way up north to the Yukon to check that out too. Lived in a tent for a summer. Um, Kind of all along the way, picking up these sort of ideas about what we wanted to do and where we wanted to end up. And somewhere along the way, I ran into the idea of permaculture. I had come across Sepp Holzer's Farming with Nature documentary, maybe about 10 years ago now, when I was living in this little tiny community in the Kootenays in British Columbia. And we were kind of part of this. This lady was trying to start some sort of commune, so she had just built this tiny house that we had moved into, and we had pretty much free reign to create our own garden and like grow whatever we wanted around the area. So yeah, since that's when I really started to dig into it. Prior to that, I did quite a bit of traveling, saw a few different countries, and actually my first introduction to permaculture was in Australia in about 2009. I was going to visit my friend's family over there, and they had a friend of the family. They were like, "Oh, I want to take you to see this really interesting garden," and it was a mature food forest that he had been managing for. I guess it was like a youth group in town, so all the troubled teens and stuff would go there for after school programs, and he would teach them about food forest and gardening and stuff. So that was my first real run in with that. Yeah, I mean, grew up in BC, doing a lot of nature-based things, hiking and camping and stuff, and fishing as a kid. So I was always into nature and outdoor stuff. And then, yeah, so I guess that's backwards, but
Yeah, well, what spoke to you about permaculture? Why were you drawn to it?
I think coming from like such a nature nerd sort of
Mhm.
uh, background, and it was always like I was always nerding out about animals and their place growing up and asking all the crazy questions um, about what animals were doing what in the woods and stuff like that. So I think coming across permaculture and realizing you could work within those systems that sort of were already working and go from there, and then the potential that was to be seen with what happens when you actually apply a little bit of your own influence on those systems. I think that was what was so interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, and along the way you got involved with Permapeople.
Yeah,
What is that about? What has been your involvement with that, and what is this group trying to do?
sure. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I was laid off from my job, and in an attempt to do some sort of I guess upskilling, I had always had the idea that I wanted to create some sort of plant database. So I started building this out just as a sort of side project, and I started trying
Database,
to use it to
is it
catalog.
like a bunch of different names of plants in an Excel sheet, or what do you mean by? and
Yeah,
just
it's like code stuff. Sorry, I work in tech, so like I wanted to get better at some of these technologies. So I was going to build out this whole thing with the whole actual database and stuff like that. So I started compiling all the plants where I was living at the time, um, as a way to sort of do this upskilling project. And so I had something just working on my computer, and then I was on Permies one day, and I saw somebody, Ben, my friend Ben, who's now I'm working on Permapeople with, but he had posted and said, I'm looking to create a plant database. I want to create something for like that's permaculture focused and somewhere where people can go to just get the information. And if anyone's interested, just reach out to me. So I did, and yeah, that was almost 3 years now. Ben and I have been working on it. We've been the core of the project. The original mission was to sort of create like a permaculture focused database because that was not something we had seen, where you'd focus more on like the niches and the layers and such systems, along with a lot of like the companion planting and things like that.
Nice. So in this database, you said companion planting, you could list like kale. I want to plant kale and I want to know what the companion plants are. And it's designed to make them come up and tell you, I guess, maybe why the relationships are beneficial and
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
Okay.
and it would be like this: kale's a herb, so fill in your other niches or whatever.
Right. And
Yeah,
is for people also like a social media? Does it have like a social like a social media element where there's like people chatting with each other and or is it
yeah.
mainly
So
a database?
for sure. So we've actually that was the original mission back when we had started. But now it's become much more about like digging into the open data on the internet and bringing as much planting information as we can together. So that's for the last 2 years or so. That's what we've been focused on, much further beyond permaculture. But yeah, we've worked on the database first as our main foundation. We started with Plants for a Future, restructured a bunch of their data, and pulled out as many data pieces to make it as searchable as possible. So in this way, like we could, instead of just having walls of text like you see on Wikipedia or Plans for a Future, we've made it so you could search for every single data point. And now if we've done this with thousands of plants, like we have almost 9,000 plants on there now that you can do this with, so you can get super granular. And then based on this, we've created lists. So like you as a gardener can come create lists of whatever plants you want, organize them in certain ways, group them. And we're working on some new features there as well, where you can actually show custom fields. So you'd be able to grab like all the flowers that are all the herbaceous flowers in your garden, and sort them by height or check which time they bloom or any of the data that we have and sort of organize it that way. We've also got an open marketplace, which has been not something we thought would take off, but we created it for ourselves to start some seed swapping. Um, and it's become, I think, our biggest feature on there, especially in like the late winter. Basically, people can go there and they can sell or swap. We encourage swapping. 99% of the seeds on there are available for swap currently. There's over 200 seed listings currently. And we try not to encourage the exchange of money at all. So we don't really have any features to support that. But yeah,
And is the idea with a seed swap that different people are kind of developing their own landrace varieties and they have like fourth year in a row they've been developing some crop with unique characteristics and then or is it I bought some seeds from a major seed vendor
sure.
go and I decided I don't want them so here
Right.
is there kind of a tendency there?
It leans a bit both ways, I think. Like a good number of them is just people like seed savers that are out to trade and give them away freely, really, which is what we want to encourage as much as possible.
Yeah,
We did
like
part of
a
our mission is to just make it as accessible as possible. So like we're happy to just send seeds to people.
yeah, I mean it reminds me of a seed library like here
Mhm.
in our town nearby there's like it's literally at the public library certain
Right.
times you go and you pick up seeds and you get some varieties that have certain families have been growing probably for 100 years or so and
Exactly. Yeah.
very locally specific.
Yeah.
uh, So that's cool. Is the people who've been involved with kind of the seed swapping, is it like what's the geographic extent? Is it mainly in your region of Canada, or you like swapping with people in Costa Rica and crazy stuff like that?
I try to stick to similar bioregions
Yeah.
for my own swapping, but we have people in all over the place, like Africa and Europe and stuff as well, which is
Okay.
kind of cool. And then all over North America.
Okay. So if somebody just wants to have a really good searchable database for plants and the relationship with other plants and soil types and everything, or if they want to go into kind of a barter seed saving barter economy, uh,
Yeah,
perma, permapeople.org is where to go.
exactly. That's it.
Nice, nice. And is there any other features that you want to highlight about Permapeople, or ideas for where you want to go in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of our mission, like our main mission, is to help as many people grow as many plants as they can for both food and utility. And lots of what we've seen so far is either just for aesthetics, like other databases and all that, or for food. But I think utility is a sort of an underserved space currently. So we're working a lot with sort of the regeneration mindset now, working to bring as much data about utility into the database as possible. So we're hoping to power some real life projects for like regenerative projects. So anything to do with textiles and raw materials, using plants for those, dyes. We would like to work on some herbal stuff as well, like medicinals. Um, yeah, I mean, we also just released an API, which is cool because we're hoping to really start powering other projects too. All of our data is Creative Commons, so the data that we use is also Creative Commons anywhere we pull from, or it's just us cherry picking pieces from available data sets and inputting it all ourselves, so that we ensure that it's all under
Okay.
Creative Commons to be available for everybody.
Nice. And so I imagine that it's not generating income. So this is kind of a labor of love.
It
If
is
you will.
absolutely
Yeah.
a
You guys
labor of love.
you guys like take donations or
We
uh
we
so
try to. It's
yeah.
not something we're very good at, but we've had a couple people donate a few, for a few months or whatever, or people reach out once in a while and tell us, "Oh, we really don't want this to disappear."
Yeah.
But Ben, have to give him props, but he's been paying for it the whole time.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, this can lead maybe into a conversation about, how do we think about capitalizing the commons?
hmm
Um, and there's a lot of ideas floating around about that, but nothing, it still seems to be really hard to engage in kind of what you guys are doing. It's there's not really a lot of social support for it. And
yeah,
I'm curious if you have thoughts about that, or thoughts
yeah,
about ways that, I guess better models besides, hoping that, somebody takes pity on you in your project.
totally.
That's, something that where you're producing real value, but it's not commodified value,
Yeah.
and it makes it. It's not like you're doing it for money, but it makes it hard to manage the other parts of your life where you still have to pay bills and everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we when we first started, we had discussed like what do we want to do with this as a project as well. And one sort of idea we were playing with right away was like, can we make like a permaculture organization or an organic organization, we like to call it. Um, and part of that is like we try to be as sociocratic as possible. Like any volunteers that are with us at the time can help make decisions. We do random votes if we're deciding on what to work on next. We don't have deadlines. We don't have hours. So we just work when we can, what we're feeling like, as long as it makes us happy. That's our main rule. We'll work on it. With regards to monetization, that kind of plays into it as well. We don't want to do anything that would potentially, I guess, sort of sour that mission. I don't think it's, without it being a gift or a donation, I don't think it's necessarily compatible with our mission. So for now, we're going to do that. We're going to try to package things, potentially sell them that way. Right now, we're talking about potentially publishing a book or like a compendium with some of our data. So you'd have maybe categories, say, first one would be common garden plants, and maybe you just have like whole bunch of data, some interesting articles in like a zine format, and then maybe we would crowdsource the publishing
Mhm.
sell off or send off a bunch of those. And then to try to make more value out of that, one idea we had too was to help other organizations potentially raise money if they want to. So we would open source the book and pass it off to maybe local garden like co-ops or community gardens and let them print and sell those too. So I think in that way, like we're trying to stick to the permaculture model as much as possible, like stacking functions, anything we make money from, other people should also be able to make some money from too.
Nice, nice. Okay, and do you want to talk about kind of what what your kind of growing space operation is? Do you grow mainly for kind of household sufficiency? I think I saw a while back you were like getting a lot of starters going and giving them away or something.
Mm,
But what's your growing operation like? What's your space like? What are
sure,
you working with in
sure.
the fall?
So I'm on about a third of an acre here, so pretty small.
Mhm.
But we've got forest in the back, so there's a little bit of expansion. It's not ours, but it's there, so it gives us a lot of materials and stuff to work with when we need it.
Mhm.
Um, I've got a couple of raised beds, just 4x10 that I put up last year. We're pretty new here. I just moved here in September of 2021, so just over a year now. Yeah, I've got a couple of raised beds in, and I've already put in some sort of rows of perennials and shrubs and trees. So I've got a bunch of fruit trees and nut trees in pretty much the first summer, as well as the raised beds. So
Mhm.
got a good number of those. I tried to focus on things that I'd be able to reproduce or use to propagate more. Um, and then as well, I've been trying for the last few years, even before here, I've been really trying to learn how to propagate things from forage, seed, and nuts. So I've had pretty good luck with nuts so far. So I'm kind of focused on nuts because it's so easy and the outcome is a lot bigger. So when I was in British Columbia, we had a really cool heritage nut grove there. So I was able to go in the fall and collect about like 10 different kinds of nuts from, there was like 5 different kinds of walnuts, a bunch of hazelnuts and things like that. So I experimented with just starting them like the classic cold stratification in a bucket with some wet leaves over the winter.
Mhm.
As they started to sprout, I just threw them all into nursery pots and ended up with about a dozen massive walnut trees by the end of summer. And they were like 3, 4 feet tall. They were very happy from that those genetics.
Mhm.
So I was able to swap and pass out a few of those. So when we came here, I've been doing the same thing. I found a source for hickory nuts, and there's a couple of really nice black walnut trees around. Wild ones. I went out and found the ones that produce the biggest nuts I could. So I've been trying to sprout a lot of those. I did some of that last year, and again had about a dozen trees. I used them for bartering with some local farmers and got some organic hay and stuff for the gardens. And then just gifted a whole bunch of the rest to friends. And then I planted a few in the forest behind us as well. Um,
Very cool. And so are you gonna is your plan just to kind of continue like make more raised beds, propagate more nut trees? Do you have kind of like are you taking it like year by year, or do you have like this kind of grand 5 year vision or something?
sure. I'm trying to put together the vision now. So I was doing a bit of crowdsourcing on Twitter last year with it. So that was kind of fun. And I had a few landscape and permaculture designers reach out with some tips, which was really neat. Um, so yeah, it was more about getting the flow going, how are you going to actually use the space? So far I've started in the safe spots and where we are in this area, there's no fences. That's not something they do here. So everybody's got these massive lots. And so I've kind of just started using all the margins to plant in. So I planted a row that's like fruit, cherry and hazelnuts and mulberries and some Kusa dogwood. And underplant, there's already a couple peonies there that are going good. So I've been able to use those for some chop and drop throughout the year. And then just working on thickening that out and just I'm just throwing whatever spare seed I have around the base of them and then planting out a bunch of chives and strawberries because I know those will take anywhere. And then I've done the same on the other side. So I've got sort of lined on the margins out of the way a little bit, but I've started to expand in there by the end of last year. So I've got ideas for how the flow is going to go. Yeah, ideally I'll have several dozen fruit and nut trees Sticking with the mostly small ones for now, since there's not a lot of room
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
big stuff.
Do you have problems with like deer eating your trees? Do you have to fence everything, or you just
We actually haven't seen any deer around here. I think squirrels and bulls are the
yeah,
biggest issues right now.
very lucky. I mean, I we have to basically fence all of our trees.
Yeah.
Just they'll just get decimated, and
Oh yeah.
it's such a pain in the ass because it kind of it just looks bad. It's a lot of money. Um, it kind of, and it also it kind of, I feel like it restricts how I can think about like companion plants and
Absolutely.
kind of guilds, just because you have to fence around it, and it's like, well,
That's a whole other constraint. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah,
had the same issue at our last place, like quite overrun by deer when I was in British Columbia.
yeah. I mean, that might be, I don't know, this is like not really talked about, but I feel like this might be like one of the biggest constraints to the like the permaculture food forest vision
Yeah,
of just
absolutely. Like the size of the fences I see on some people's gardens around here. Not, I guess our neighborhood seems to be safe. Like we haven't seen any deer. They seem to not like the forest. It's pretty mucky, so maybe that's why. I don't know, but
okay.
yeah,
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm envious.
yeah. For now, for now. Wait this year, and we'll be overrun probably.
Yeah. So, let me ask you, uh, when did you start coming across kind of the doomer optimism crowd, and what did that term and kind of this approach, like how did what was it, what did it mean to you?
Yeah, sure.
I'm curious what you think about kind of the philosophy of what we're trying to do, and some of the controversies that have come up that I think you've noticed, and things. Yeah, I'm curious like what you think about this scene, kind of like you know what you like about it, and what critiques you have.
Sure. Um, well, I can't. I should look. I should search back one of these days and see when I first started. But I feel like it's got to be like since I moved, maybe right before I moved here. So I've been hanging around for about a year and a half, or since I came across you. I think it was probably your account that I came across first, probably for the permaculture content.
Mhm.
But when I first saw you guys talking about doomer optimism, and I think I listened to one of the podcast episodes, one of the early ones. Um, it it just encompassed so much of what me and my partner have sort of been trying to live
Yeah.
like.
Mhm.
Um, we've always been about trying to provide as much as possible and trying to be as resilient as possible. Like,
Are you guys doomers or post doomers? Like did you go through a period where you're like, oh wow, you know, things are really messed up? Uh,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
I was ready for the collapse. I was ready for the zombie apocalypse, like, but I think like as I've aged and like as my daughter has grown too, I've learned to become much more optimistic, and seeing what's possible out there. And I think
Kind of have
one of
to.
the most interesting change, like I feel like coming across doomer optimism was like almost a perfect time. But when I saw the definition, I was like, oh, that's exactly like my whole. That's it. That's it. Explains what's in my brain right now. But I feel like one of the big realizations and coming through that, like when I was like, yeah, let's just collapse, that was maybe like 10 years ago or so. I was ready for that. But like, yeah, you start to realize what's possible and that there is more and that we can build outside of what's there already. You don't have to participate in the garbage.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I'm curious if you have any thoughts about kind of the sociological dynamics. I guess I'm
Yeah,
particularly interested in asking you, particularly, so I get the sense that you're kind of leftish, kind of a liberal, which I, frankly am as well.
mhm.
And it's very kind of ideologically diverse, and a lot of like controversies come. And I'm curious, if you have any thoughts about that, or
Yeah,
yeah, what you.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I'm definitely left leaning, on the political compass, libertarian left
Mhm.
as of my most recent take. Um, but I I like being a part of the Doomer Optimism crew because I'm exposed to so many more viewpoints I wouldn't be otherwise. Like I'm actually having conversations and participating with people that are quite right wing and seeing their points of view, and I like what's happening with the sort of bridging. Like we are finding all of that common ground, and I find a lot of those characters quite fascinating, and I'm learning a lot from it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was kind of one of the initial premises of the podcast was that um I mean, I think it's a lot more complicated. I don't think about it quite this simply now, but one of the thoughts I had going in was that kind of localism or say, neoliberalism was kind of like a different axis, uh,
Mm-hmm.
left and right. And so the idea was that, we're all coming in with our left and right viewpoints, but we could collaborate on this other axis,
Mm-hmm.
which there's potential for a lot more common ground. And so, on the localist axis, it's easy because and in permaculture more generally, there's this really interesting phenomenon where, a lot of people, a lot of the new entrants into permaculture, have pretty conservative viewpoints
Yeah.
otherwise, right? And the common ground is that, a lot of people just realize that a little bit more self-sufficiency and community sufficiency and growing things, and interacting with nature is actually a healthy thing to do. It's a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
And, when you're in neighborhoods where people have that ethos, connecting there first makes it perhaps a little bit easier to approach more difficult left-right topics
Yeah.
with more of a platform of like common ground and trust. It's not that you can like avoid those things because they inevitably come up and they're important, but it's nice to have some sense of like, okay, like, you know, I resonate with this person in a pretty deep way in this way. So let me try and be a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more
Yeah.
open.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. Or listen a little bit more even.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, do you find that that's been the case?
Sometimes.
I
That's why I think it's, I said it's a little bit more complicated
yeah.
now. Um, on Twitter, not so much. On Twitter,
Hmm.
not so much, right? I think just the incentives of the platform,
Hmm.
especially when you could be having a dialogue with somebody and just any rando can kind of just jump in and
Hmm.
throw the whole thing off kilter, right? And then there's the likes and there's kind of adverse incentives,
Hmm.
in many ways. And so I think oftentimes Twitter, even DO Twitter, is kind of a shit show,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
I try and, uh, oftentimes I just try to stay out of it. And
Hmm.
sometimes I feel like I just have to get into, put it either be constructive or put it in my point of view. And from my
Yeah.
point of view, whip someone's ass if from my
Sure.
perspective, they need it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, but for example, we have the group chat, and I find that a lot more constructive. Like it just seems to be a different incentive structure, and you're
Yeah.
now where where there's not actually a lot of fighting,
Yeah.
which is interesting. There's a little bit of like back and forth and tension, but there's not really a lot of like dunking.
Yeah. That's it. It's a lot more friendly in that way.
Friendly, and like on Twitter, it's like if you dunk somebody, you get a lot of like, a lot of people give you positive validation for it. But I think
Mhm.
in like, more of a private space, you don't get positive validation. People just think you're a jerk.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You get called out right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Um, One thing I found interesting about like the trying to come to a common ground sort of thing is in actions, most of the people involved or like in that sphere are doing the same thing. They're all taking the same actions, but where we get stuck is on the semantics and definitions of things. Like
Yeah.
people get so offended when you use certain definitions for certain things, even though it to you it describes that action. And I feel like that that's part of what's brought the Doomosphere together is that people are doing the same things or they think the same things is the right thing to do, but they can't agree on even a name for it half the time, and that causes so much division right there.
Right. Or even the reasons for why they're doing it.
Yeah, that too. Yes.
Homesteading, and they're, you know, doomers in some way, but they're doomers for very, very different reasons, and
Hmm.
reasons that others might not validate.
Sure. Yes. Right.
Yeah, like I think too, like on the left, like a reason might be climate change, and conservatives, might not see that as very salient, or
Hmm.
even that's not right conspiracy, but they might see kind of have more of a critique of kind of centralized regime kind of power
Yes.
that's against their interests, and so
Hmm.
they have to figure out how to be more independent from the system, and but as you said, it all cashes out into kind of the same pretty much kinds of activities,
Yeah.
uh, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny too. Like you can't even get some people to admit that they're doomer optimists as well. Even some of the OG doomer optimists, which I find pretty funny. And the
I get that. I mean, nobody wants, for a while, like we were looser with it before, where we're like, we don't even want to call it a movement or anything
Mhm.
like that. One of our first episodes, actually pre-podcast, when we had this other series on the Stoa, we had a whole conversation with Joe Norman about labels, and like
Okay.
how labels can get you in a lot of trouble. And we're like, oh, we're just being very kind of loose with it. And
Hmm.
over time, it's become, I think, more of a identity.
Hmm.
But yeah, I definitely respect that. Like it's just a label
Yeah.
that could describe a center of kind of mimetic gravity online.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so I don't know what else. What else you want to talk about?
I don't know. What about you? Why don't you tell me what you're working on?
um well, right now, let me think. I'm gonna interpret that in terms of like homestead. uh
Sure.
Gonna start kind of a meat chicken operation
Yeah.
spring. So just built a chicken tractor, or it's mostly built. And uh and besides that, we have a pretty good sized garden. It went really well last year. It's upwards of 3,000 square feet or something.
Okay.
And so that's been kind of the center of my focus. Part of it is just like we haven't had a lot of disposable income,
Hmm.
just because we basically are able to pay our bills and live paycheck to paycheck at this point. Um, and so I haven't really been able to invest in like capital intensive projects like
Yes.
buy a tractor, and I just can't
Sure.
do that. And so I focused a lot on like the last couple of years, like maximizing what I could do for really cheap. And one thing you could do for really cheap is garden.
Yes. Absolutely.
It just takes sweat,
Yep.
sweat equity. And then trees are not bad either, except for the damn fencing.
Yeah.
uh and then yeah, and so I think it's kind of just continue on with that, like plant more trees, expand the garden a little bit, refine our process a little bit, get a meat hen operation going. And then I've talked about this before on the podcast, but I'm trying to uh, kind of start organizing kind of these more kind of regional activity, among
Hmm.
people, both that I just know, in real life, as well as people who live nearby online, of just having more kind of activities, workshops, uh, mutual aid, kind of
Nice.
various kinds of collective organizing. And so one thing we've talked about is kind of these rotational meetups, basically, where we help each other, or rotational work days, kind of like barn raising.
Okay. On someone's property. Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing that would be nice when we butcher all the chickens, which
Right.
was like 2025 or so, to get them over there to do that. So that should be fun. That'll be hopefully that'll be an excuse to like actually meet people in real life that I only know online right now,
Okay. Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
get
Is
some
that
help.
is that that's the main organizing principle there? Was like around mutual help, mutual aid.
Yeah, yeah, and I have kind of fanciful visions of more kind of bioregionalistic kind of organizing in general, but this seems like a good place to start. Of
Yeah,
just start meeting like minds, start engaging with each other in projects, helping each
yeah.
other out, and then see what goes from there.
Oh,
So
that's great.
yeah, so that's the main thing. Again, I thought about we thought about getting sheep, thought about getting sheep this year, but just decided. My wife is not not so hot on the idea of sheep. Uh,
Okay,
I don't think I've quite convinced her, but also it just seemed a bit much.
right.
Given
One step at a time.
so yeah, so meat birds seemed like a better, an easier way to get into kind of the meat, meat side of kind of homesteading. Besides we have layer hens, but to
Right.
actually
Oh, that's a great start.
yeah.
Nice. And how long have you been there for on your property?
This is our entering into our third year. Let's see, no, we got
Okay.
in early 2020. So yeah,
Okay.
this
Nice.
is our third,
Um,
fourth year. I think it's actually our fourth year.
okay. And regarding your gardening, are you a chaos gardener or are you very organized?
I'm pretty okay, as I wouldn't say I'm organized, but I think our garden last year was phenomenal. I think I was very pleased, especially compared to the year before.
Okay.
Uh, the year before, I didn't really know what I was doing still, and I
Mhm.
decided to move to kind of a no-till-ish system.
Okay.
And yeah, it worked out really well. And so I'm not organized. It's kind of like, oh, it's February, it's April 1st. We need to get these seeds started, and we get them in the ground. But I think I have a pretty good foundation in terms of like, you know, building up the soil, uh,
Right.
and providing the conditions. And then
Okay.
in terms of, yeah, I don't really know. I think I'm decent. I still have to look up a lot of stuff, in
Mhm.
terms of varieties and when to
Right.
plant. And
Of course.
more people could perhaps help with that. But yeah, last year I felt very validated in what I did.
Great. Good output for what you put in.
The previous 2 years before that were okay, but they
Yeah.
weren't. Yeah.
What do you focus on? Like, do you have a handful or do you experiment a lot or?
So we've experimented a lot. Like we've basically tried to plant most things that are thought of as good in this area. Um, but I definitely like there's a few things that I want to kind of expand just because I just think they're great crops for us. Garlic,
Yeah, of course.
garlic
Can't have
expanding
enough garlic.
expanding
It's
garlic.
expensive this year
We're trying to
too.
basically expand every year, like basically take half of our crop, replant it, and then
Great.
you know, each garlic has like 4 or 5 cloves or
Right.
bulbs, and so we're trying to continue to expand that. That if we thought if we were going to have like a cash crop, it would be that would be probably the first one because it's relatively easy to grow. It's also you plant it at a different time of year, so
Yeah.
it's part of the rush,
Yeah,
uh,
true.
and it's a high value crop. Another one is I think we're expanding potatoes. Like we still have a whole bunch of potatoes in our storage in our basement, and just potatoes are just awesome. Right?
Yeah,
They're
they're
just like
awesome.
such
I
a
love growing potatoes
yeah,
too. It's
they're just such a
always fruitful.
they're always such a solid staple. They definitely probably more than any other vegetable give a feeling of like food security. If you have like
Mhm.
a ton of potatoes in your basement, you're like, well, I might, I might not be very healthy, but we won't starve for a little while.
Yeah, right.
Um,
I like that you can kind of just stuff them in too. They're
yeah,
easy to plant, like I had some spare corners this year with like banked
yeah,
soil, so I just threw a bunch of potatoes in there and they did great. I fed them lawn clippings and it was
nice. Yeah, and we're also doing that. Last year, I tried this kind of no dig strategy. We put them on the surface and then pile on a bunch of
oh
hay.
yeah, right. Straight on like fresh.
Yeah, I would put like an inch of compost on top and then just
Okay,
pile on, and that's
awesome.
I think worked great. And then I think tomatoes is the other big one
Yeah,
because like you just can't make enough tomato sauce and salsa with
Yeah,
it.
it is nice for sure. We tried a whole bunch last year and we had quite a few. I found one of the most efficient ways to preserve them though was freezing. We did a bit of canning last year, but it's just so much energy and so much work. But
Yeah.
uh, sort of on a whim, we just froze a bunch of tomatoes, and we've been cracking them out throughout the winter, and it's super nice to just whip up a
You
slot.
guys like boil them first or
No, we just threw them fresh, all mixed. We had like four different varieties just into big freezer bags and straight into the freezer.
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, we made a bunch of tomato sauce and salsa and hot sauce, and
Oh, nice.
we're, we still have a little bit left, but we're running low, so we're like, okay, we could definitely do more tomatoes. You can't have
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. It's hard. They're so fun too.
Yeah,
Like all the different varieties.
right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah, and
yeah,
they're fun to grow, trellis and things like
yeah.
that.
Experiment.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, are you guys planning on getting any animals on in your place, or is it just too small?
I think we've been talking about getting like a couple ducks or a couple chickens. I had a couple ducks at our last place and a dog, and that was pretty fun. But just the amount of work required as soon as you get animals, it just it goes up a lot. So right
Yeah.
now we're very much in the experimental phase,
Okay.
and I'm okay with not having them for now. My neighbor's got chickens. Two of our other permaculture friends in the neighborhood have chickens, so we get more than enough eggs.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, and we've got friends with a pig farm, and someone else does meat chickens, so we're pretty supplied
Mhm.
uh, where we need it for now. But yeah, a couple ducks eventually would be the plan. I like ducks.
Very cool. What kind of water would they have, like a little pond, or how would you?
Yeah, I'd like to put in a little pond back there eventually. Yeah, there's enough space. It's nice and shady right by the forest, so I could make a cool little area for them under the trees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Would you eat them, or would you just use them for their eggs or
eggs. Yeah,
eggs?
I like that they're so hardy.
Yeah.
We're we were living like way up on the coast before by the ocean, and we had a couple ducks, just runner ducks for their eggs, and in the yard. It was pretty cool. They were pretty fun, interactive,
Yeah.
perfect for the rain, obviously, in the Pacific Northwest. But
They eat your they eat slugs. Do they
yeah,
let them into your garden, or will they destroy the garden as well?
they were pretty okay with the garden. There was like it was edged with logs, and they didn't really mess around with it, but
Yeah.
they were more interested in the pond and the slugs.
Okay, but even if they got in, because I'm asking because so like last year I was growing beans, and every night after it got dark, I had to go out and pick off all of the little slugs off of our beans because they were just destroying our beans.
Oh
And
yeah,
if the ducks
no,
could do that, that'd be great, but they'd probably just eat the plants as well,
yeah. I
right?
wonder. They would go for the slugs first,
Yeah,
in my experience. Yeah, for sure they would. They liked seeds a lot. That was the main thing. I had sown like wild dock all over, just because it was a fun thing, and that was already growing there. But they loved the dock seed, so that was pretty neat. So like in the fall when the stems would break because of all the seed, the ducks would go crazy for it.
nice, nice, sweet. Yeah. Uh, what else? What else? What haven't I asked? What would you like to talk about?
Um, I don't know. I guess we could. I don't know.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
so
that's
be
it. Um,
any part of your background that feels under addressed in in your intro of what's motivating you, or theories of change, or different parts of your operation
yeah,
that you want to talk about. We could
yeah.
talk about the slippery mind thing that you brought up, but that might be.
The
Uh,
wish. Sorry.
we were talking about uh, this slippery mind. Doing something creates a slippery mind.
Okay.
That might take us into areas that you don't want to bring up publicly. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were let's talk about seasonal uh like seasonal moods, right? So earlier I remember you were talking about a little bit earlier in the winter that this winter has been pretty difficult and you were really looking forward to like getting back into planting. um yeah, I don't know, do you want to reflect on that a little bit or
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, it, things have been changing like weather-wise here. It's been so crazy this year. We had an incredibly cold start, and then it was super warm to the point that around Christmas, some of my plants were budding. Like the leaves were getting fat, which is super crazy. We usually do a lot of cross-country skiing in the winter, and there's been no snow up until then for this. It gets super crusty. Um, it's just such a difficult start, and especially with the timing of everything uh, that's been happening
yeah,
lately in the world and stuff, I guess.
yeah,
Things are generally unstable. Canada's health system is basically collapsing these days.
yeah. Tell me about that. I don't know much about Canada's health. I know
Sure.
that I know that you guys are really into euthanasia or
Yeah,
something,
yeah, right, right.
but
So
maybe it's connected.
basically, they've been up until before COVID. They've just been the medical system has been working. It's been chugging along, but they've slowly been eroding the funding for it.
Okay.
And then they weren't putting any effort into sort of training new staff. So we've had obviously the baby boom issue that everyone's seeing everywhere, and people retiring. So like it was already just trucking along, and then COVID hit, and obviously capacity went way up. But all the boomers that were in that space decided to retire. So like we're left with almost nothing. And then the last almost 2 decades of like pulling funding back because it was just trucking along just fine has left us in a position where half the provinces now are trying to privatize healthcare, basically just in the last year. So we've seen the services almost disappear over the last 2 years. There's no doctors, nobody's got family doctors, there's no walk-in clinics anymore.
Yeah.
In half the provinces, it's just not a thing anymore. Trying to
So
book an appointment in Quebec,
yeah.
they have like a contract. They contracted somebody to build an app where you try to book to get an appointment.
Right.
And this is very much the same. Lots of the big telecom conglomerates are getting into it, into this the health space. But basically, they only give you appointments 48 hours in advance, and you can pay for privileged access. So this right there, it's like we've seen over the last year. Even it's just disappearing before our eyes.
So this is an example of kind of collapse happening in real time. That's
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
abstract. That's like this is actually happening. Well,
Absolutely.
and health is something that I think is generally under theorized and under discussed in permaculture
Yeah,
spaces, right? Like we always talk about like food and water and heating, but not so much health, except for like try and build up your immune system with healthy food and things, but not we're gonna depart the system, exit the system, but what if you break your arm or something?
yeah, yeah, that's it. I know that we've been
Yeah,
talking about that a lot. Like you can only get so far with eating healthy and doing regular exercise, like it's inevitable, us living in the environment that we do, that somebody's not going to get, 1 in 2 people are going to get cancer. So, or your kids are going to break their arms at some point, right? Like,
yeah, yeah. And I don't know the answer to that in terms of like kind of
community,
our
community doctors, community nurses, right?
theorizing about living in post collapse society. I don't think a lot of people really think about the healthcare dimension. Like you're
Hmm.
still going to want doctors with some pretty decent tools and
Yeah,
medical supplies and things. And if you don't have that, life is going to be a lot more difficult for
right. How
most
do you
people.
do that without like outside the system?
Yeah. It's rough, right? It's rough. um I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. Or
Yeah, I don't know.
now you're
Um,
seeing that in real time, so that's kind of scary.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, Regarding the slippery mind stuff, do you grow any of that there?
No, no. I I just I'm not much of a connoisseur. Like
Okay.
I probably could. I don't know where else I would find weed. I don't have a dealer. I hardly ever smoke it. But
Okay.
if I was ambitious, I would figure out how to do that. But I'm just not that
Yeah.
ambitious. Yeah.
Um,
What about you?
at our last place we did, I ordered some seeds, and it's so crazy how advanced the genetics are in some of these plants. So we did like a full organic grow. I just got some of those big cloth bags, and some sunshine mix soil, uh, and we grew 4 plants, a couple indicas and a sativa. Um, they By the end of the summer, I had to build a greenhouse. I had like a 6 foot greenhouse, and they quickly outgrew that. And so I went and got these like 14-foot 2x4s and made an A-frame in the yard, and wrapped it in 6 mil poly. And by the end of the summer, the trees were too big for that, so they were growing out of a 12-foot greenhouse. So it's pretty crazy. I've had weed for like 2 years because of that. More than that, it's been like 3 years, and I still have some in food saver freezer bags, like vacuum sealed.
Well, I mean, probably, these days everyone grows up. I was going to say that could be like your main your main barter crop in the
It
future.
would be a good cash crop, honestly. Yeah, and the way we grew it, we did like
Is it legal there? I have no idea what the legal.
yeah, you can grow I think 4 plants in every province except Quebec, but federally you can grow it, but provincially you can't. So
Yeah.
yeah, but in my experience, pretty easy to grow, especially with good genetics, I guess. We did like what's it called, alfalfa. We just sprouted alfalfa, and I guess that's a super rich organic fertilizer. So we'd sprout alfalfa for like a liter of it. You'd blend that up, and then we'd throw a bit of kelp from the ocean in there and blend that up together, and that was the main feed for the plants, and that seemed to do incredibly well for them because we got a huge crop of flowers and leaves and everything. The biomass was insane too. Obviously, you're getting tree branches, which might be decent for firewood too if you're really going for it.
And what going back to the slippery mind thing, do you see it as kind of like a medicine? Like what does it do for what does it do for you? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I'm very casual
mm,
user these days, just very occasional, but I do like to, smoke a bit on the weekend, and it like helps me relax, puts me in the zone. I really used to like smoking and making music.
yes.
Um, I don't play a lot of music these days, but yeah, getting together with my friends back in the day, we would write some pretty crazy songs. Just make sure you're recording it.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
And what's this? You resonated when I used this term "slippery mind," and I said that in the context of, again, I hardly ever smoke these days, but I
Mhm.
used to smoke more. One thing I noticed is that the way I describe it is that my mind becomes a little more slippery, and in the positive sense, that makes me more creative,
Yeah.
uh, just more dynamic in general. But the less positive is that I seem to have less. Um, there's just less control in general,
Yeah.
and just kind of random thoughts and perceptions arising that can be disturbing and unwelcome
Yeah.
et cetera. And I'm curious,
Absolutely. It
yeah,
it occasionally will rehash some of my like bad experiences or feelings, like some major traumatic events. But like it's funny because it is that sometimes it's the opposite of that, right? But other times you'll just be in that space, and then all of a sudden I'm reliving
right.
something
Which
that I don't
might be, from the
want.
perspective of like processing trauma, but
Hmm. Yeah,
but you won't necessarily process it.
exactly. Maybe I'm not in the right mind frame for that then, but that's exactly it. Like it feels like it could be a good time to work through it, because it really puts a different spin on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, things definitely become much more somatic for me, where I relate to emotions or even how I perceive other people, and let's just say
Mhm.
energy fields. I
Yeah.
experience it physically, right? As kind of like an orientation of energy, and and there's definitely a lot of like movement of energy up and down my body, for example. And it's all how you, for me, I found also how you work with it. Like if it gets stuck somewhere, like you
Hmm.
punch up around it, then it can actually be very, it can be very bad. It can be even physiologically kind of
Right.
harmful, and as well as psychologically. But if you're kind of like able to process it, and you know dancing helps with that, and
Yeah.
movement, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Like when you're actually active, I do really enjoy it. Sometimes I go work in the shop and try to build some stuff.
Right, yeah. um I'm definitely, yeah, it's definitely not a social drug for me.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I just can't vibe with a normal conversation. No,
No,
I just become very quiet and observe. But if I'm by myself, then I'll start dancing or something.
like sure, sure. Walking in the forest and foraging is especially fun that
Yes.
way too, like mushroom hunting or something, because you can be hyper focused and really noticing other things. Um,
So do you think it helps like build your kind of intuitive capacities for like,
Absolutely, 100%. It helped me realize that you can smell certain mushrooms, for instance, when you're foraging.
yeah,
Like yeah, that it kind of puts me in that heightened focus state, and it helps me realize that, like, well, I can actually smell those. So now, even when not smoking, I've been able to recognize certain scents.
right. Tell me more about the foraging. Have you done a lot of foraging? Is that
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
kind
So I just super fascinated by fungi and mushrooms. I remember when I lived in that sort of tiny community, we were backed onto like a hillside by a big lake. So right behind the Kokanee Glacier, it's called. So we had just like endless mountains of forest. So I would just hike up there with my digital camera and my dog, and we would just go for hours, and I would just take macro shots of fungi. And I did this for like the whole year we lived there. And just fascinating as many different cool little fungi as I could, and eventually started identifying them and going from there. And yeah, so everywhere I've went as I've moved across the country and back again, I've sort of just really taken to enjoying finding fungi. Started eating it in the last few years as well. It took me a while to become confident enough in that, but
you have
I
to be
mean,
very confident,
I'm
right?
super confident in about like 6 or 7 different species now. And I really enjoy identifying it and sort of hunting for them wherever we go.
Nice. Is there any in the forest near your house?
Yeah,
That
actually, like as soon as we moved
that
in,
public land, or is that somebody's private land that just
it's private land. Yeah,
they're okay with you just going on?
yeah, it's like I think there's like 2 farm properties, and they all sort of back onto it, and they have just very, I guess, unmanaged forest. Pretty much, they cut down a few trees in there every year to take out for lumber, and then they there's a kind of an understanding here in Quebec. There's not really much public land down here in the south, so it's just kind of an understanding. Like if you're not wrecking it, it's okay. They let snowmobile trails roll through it in the winter and everything like that. Like they're well marked and everything. So there's yeah hundreds of kilometers of snowmobile trails just rolling through properties like that. So there's yeah it's kind of a cool
No deer
resource
to,
to have.
there's no deer to hunt though.
There's lots of deer. They just don't come in our yard. They don't come near us. If I go in the fall during deer season, there's deer hides and like deer stands everywhere in there. So there's obviously lots of deer around that forest, but I don't know, man. They don't like our yard or our neighborhood.
Interesting. Do you do any hunting, or are you interested in doing hunting?
Maybe one day, but uh, fish a lot in my
Nice.
life. When we lived on the Pacific coast, I did quite a bit of salmon fishing, and the rivers were super cool to be able to pull out all sorts of fish, crab off the beach and stuff. So did quite a bit of that when we were there because of the access, but it's a nice resource. Just mushrooms these days and ramps and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Go to focus in. Yeah, I don't. I want to get into hunting. I've never hunted before. My dad used like hunted when I was really young, but
Okay.
then stopped. Uh,
Yeah. Same.
I just remember being really young and staying in the car.
Okay.
And so it's yeah, I'm kind of sad that I didn't grow up doing it, but yeah,
Mhm.
something
Yeah, I think it would be a great resource. It's weird. It's a whole culture around here too. Like
here.
coming here like that time of year, it's all the I guess the tool stores. There's a store called Canadian Tire here, which is like our big like we've got outdoor stuff and car stuff. And anyways, it turns half the store turns into hunting gear. And then you'll see every weekend just literally parades of trucks driving with like deer legs sticking out the back. And there's like pop-up butchers and stuff
Yeah.
that pop up and you'll see lineups of like 15 cars with moose and deer on the back. Even tiny cars, they'll be like a sedan with a deer sticking out the back. So it's a whole thing here. It's a whole production. It's pretty neat.
I
Except
mean,
they bait here, which is interesting.
they what?
They're allowed to bait. So they sell all the gas stations sell giant bags of carrots and apples.
Yeah, they do that. They do that here as well. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, they're that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good thing. I mean, a lot of people, are able to feed, get a lot
Yeah.
of food for their families, and I guess in many places, definitely here, deer populations are always out of control.
Oh yeah. There's no shortage of deer for sure.
It just seems like a good
Yeah.
situation for like we were
They
thinking
need more of it in some places even. Yeah.
need more hunting, and so like yeah, like that's a nice problem to have in terms of boosting food security and
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Be cool to see more programs like that. Even.
programs
Right.
like what, teaching kids how to hunt or
Yeah.
yeah,
That would be cool too. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've got a 5-year-old, and so
Okay.
I've got to learn how to hunt.
Hmm.
By the time he gets old enough, I feel like I'd fail as a father if you know my kids didn't grow up hunting, and so
Sure.
that's some good motivation for
You got
me.
to pass on some of those skills for sure.
I've got to
But
gain those skills, so then I can pass
our
those.
9-year-old has a pretty good eye for mushrooms so far, and she can
Nice.
ID a whole good number. Took her fishing a few times too, but she got pretty traumatized by some fish incidents. So
Yeah. Like what?
oh, like a hook through the eye of the fish, not her, but like the eye popping out of the fish is
Yeah.
not super exciting for her, and so the fishing stopped after that trip. But
Well, maybe a couple years.
yeah, yeah,
Well, cool, man. This has been fun. It's nice to get to know you a little bit better.
yeah, same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I don't know that I missed or?
Um, Not particularly, but like regarding Permapeople, if anyone wants to collaborate on anything, we're always open to that. As I said, we have an API for that, and all our data. We're happy to hand it over if you have a project that fits our needs. Yeah, and just that's it. Keep
Cool.
building your community, I guess.
And, yeah, and you're Sim Goober on Twitter.
Yeah,
SIM
Slim Goober.
M Goober. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just real quick, what's the story behind that?
Oh, I just decided I wanted to go anon for a while, so I changed it.
But like, why Slim Goober?
Um, I I spent 9 months traveling in Australia when I was like 20, and my nickname was Slim there for some unknown reason. I think I lost lots of weight. We were living in a van and just eating avocados for months. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so I was Slim. That's it.
Mm,
And my last name is Gooder, so Goober. It's a
okay.
good
Okay.
pseudonym.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, yeah, this has been nice. Nice to get to know you a little bit better. The man behind the avatar.
Yeah, same, Jason. Thanks.
Yeah. This probably should come out in like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so.
Okay.
I mean, oh, you're doing a recording too soon, right? Aren't you interviewing somebody?
Yeah,
Who
yeah,
are you?
with the zero input agriculture dude,
Yeah. Okay.
Shane. I think he's writing fiction as well.
Very cool.
Be interesting. Yeah.
When are you doing that interview?
24th.
Before.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So you're jumping right on it. We interviewed you, and now you're qualified to interview, and you're jumping right on it. This is the kind of,
Perfect.
this is the kind of like go getter attitude that we love. So
Perfect. I'm into it. Glad to contribute to a fine cause.
great. All right, man. Take care.
Yeah, have a good night.
Bye.